Okay, now we're going to go ahead and finish up Unit 1, Lesson 5. We got all the way through Unit 1, Lesson 4, so we're going to skip that one and go straight into Lesson 5. We got through a lot of this as well. I think we only have a slide or two left to go here. So let's go ahead and get started. This unit and lesson is over what basic ideas about rights and constitutional government did colonial Americans hold. So we talked a little bit about these three basic functions, and that's where we left off, of a governor, a council, and an assembly. We also want to make sure we emphasize these other colonial constitutions and basic principles that they held. So let's get started here. A few things that were held in common for most colonial constitutions. First of all, fundamental rights. The idea that common laws in England, is like life, liberty, and property, the rights of Englishmen, apply to the citizens of the colonies as well. Also, rule of law, so that people making laws had to obey the laws as well, and they couldn't exercise them arbitrarily against certain individuals and break certain laws if they wanted to. We also look at representative government and the right to vote. The idea that if you're a landowner, you have the right to exercise voting, which is a huge right at this time, and a huge check on the government. Lastly, the idea of separation of powers, that your governors, your councils, and your assemblies should kind of be separated into a legislative, executive, and judicial branch. Sound familiar? We have those in our government still to this day, and every state government has these three branches of government as well. So, these things are very common to see still in America today. As far as separation of powers is concerned, all the colonial legislatures had the separation of powers as well. Usually they expressed a strong, very strong legislative branch. Some of them had extraordinarily weak governors, but overall, they had these three branches and separation of powers between the branches. Okay, last slide here is over how did colonial governments become more representative than governments in Britain. First of all, Americans believed in life, liberty, and of course, property. So the only way they were going to be able to continue to have life and liberty, they believed, is through property rights. So the typical requirement was 50 acres. It was fairly common in America to own that much property. So voting was proportionally higher in America than it was in England. Colonial elections usually included more than one candidate. British elections did not. So that's another way that you had more rights in America, the American colonies, and colonial legislatures had short terms, whereas Parliament in the House of Commons was a 7-year term. That's a long time to represent citizens, and maybe you could become distant from your constituents, from the people you're representing. So therefore, colonial legislatures a lot of times only had maybe a 2-year term. In some instances, they only had a 1-year term, so you didn't have a lot of time to get things accomplished in this colonial legislative system. All right, I believe that's it. So we'll have this one up for you here in a second on YouTube.